innovation is probably one of the top 2 or 3 business phenomena that's sweeping the globe. And we've gone from sort of, a brilliant IBMer in a brilliant lab or Bell Labs. We've gone to open innovation. Now we're moving into competing networks. So innovation networks are where business is at, and you only have to look at, say, iPhone versus Android, etc. So we need to move the business networks. But what comes with open innovation is openness to innovation. And I think we actually have an issue here in openness to innovation. What makes companies like Intel and Vodafone and BT successful is the openness to innovation. People are changing jobs, at a very fast pace. But we have part of the Irish society that isn't open to innovation. In fact, we have put a structure in place, and I don't want to get into that debate, the Croke Park Agreement, which is actually an inhibitor to innovation. So we've expressed a goal of being the best country in the world best small country to do business in. In fact, I think we need to expand that. We need to simply be the best society as well as the best country to do business in. But we actually have to put mechanisms in place actually to make us open to innovation. I had just one quick point. I was in Washington 2 weeks ago, and I met the new federal CTO, Todd Park, and he was promoted from Department of Health and Human Sciences Services. He's affected a major change in the U.S. healthcare, which is in a lot worse situation than our system here. One of the key things that he put in place was incentives to drive adoption. The minister talked about adoption, so he put incentives in place, for example, for doctors and hospitals actually to adopt electronic medical records. And he's been able to create this whole new entrepreneurship community around transforming healthcare. And I think there's an opportunity in Ireland. We're much smaller. We have a big healthcare problem. It's a big percentage of our budget. We could put a culture and the program in place, an innovation strategy to transform healthcare in Ireland through technology. We fix Ireland, and we build a big export business out of it. So there's a cultural element, there's an innovation strategy element, and of course, fundamentally, we have to be viable as a country moving forward. So the business model has to change.
I'm going to come back to you in a moment on those things, but Joran, if I can go back to you, what do you think do we need to do here to produce the workforce for the next economy? Is it something we can produce for ourselves, or do we just tap into, and do we need to do as Sean has suggested and bring in lots of people from overseas to collaborate with us on producing the next generation?
I don't think there's one answer to it, and I think it's a combination of things. To come back to Sean's point on the population, there's clearly enough space to double the population. I come from a very populated country, probably 8 times as populated as Ireland, and I have to say I actually like the space that Ireland has. Great golf courses and nature, but doubling I think is a fair thing. But on a serious note, I do believe that opening up the borders and bringing talented people in, whether you open it up for everybody, that may be a bit extreme, but good. Thought-provoking, but if you facilitate and make it easy for companies to bring in highly skilled, talented people, it prevents companies like ourselves to actually bring these jobs to other countries.
But Joran, sorry, do you remember in the last budget there was an initiative in relation to tax breaks for companies bringing in people from overseas? What did you make of the reaction that there was, particularly amongst a lot of politicians? This is Irish jobs which are being given to foreigners. What did you make of that reaction?
Well, I find that very disappointing. And it wasn't just politicians. I think it was across the board. And the word fear, of course, was big on the screen. And I think that's there. We think we protect and help ourselves. But actually, by closing the economy, we actually don't help ourselves. So if you allow foreign investment, if you allow foreign talent to actually come here, we can actually grow businesses. But that's largely focused to the big businesses. Smaller businesses, one shocking statistic that I'm sure you've seen before, only 2/3 of all companies in Ireland actually have an internet site. Only 2/3. That's a shockingly low number. It becomes worse if you realize that only 20% of those 66% companies actually have online capabilities, so they can actually sell things online. Now, that's a simple thing that you can change. It doesn't require a lot of education, but it is a thing that we can do as companies ourselves, and it's largely the Sohos, the SMEs, indigenous Irish. So things we can do as a business, and like I said, if you take education, we really need to radically transform education, because we still put 20, 30, whatever number of kids in a room. The teacher tells them to sit quiet and listen, whereas the reality is at home they have access to whatever information. And you may recognize this as a professor. A professor recently told me, it is hard to teach these days because I'm in front of 100 students and they all have their iPhone, their iPads in front of them, and they have access to more information than I could ever provide them with. So we need to think about that and realize that we need to fundamentally change the way we educate our people, because if we do that and allow the foreign talent to come in, then we actually have at least the people. And if we then grow a little bit, we have enough scale. And then, of course, we come back to the infrastructure point, and maybe, and this is what Mr. Rabbit is helping us with, the policy setting to facilitate infrastructure build and the ease of setting up businesses. Access to capital, less regulation, fewer rules, easier to set up businesses. If you combine these things, I think this country could become a bit of an incubator for growth.
Sean, I was very interested in what you had to say about your idea of China, making it a hub for Europe and making Ireland a place where the advantage that we have with America is that we have a common language. Yes. We have quite a lot of common cultural characteristics as well, because there are so many Irish Americans. We don't have those links with China. So how much more difficult would it be to encourage the Chinese to come into Ireland compared to getting the Americans in?
Yeah, so China views Ireland as a great place to learn English, for one. But it's quite interesting. I read a statistic recently that 4 times as many people in China are learning English than live in the UK. So 250 million people or so are learning English in China already, because it's the international language of business. It's that everyone knows to get ahead, you need to learn English. That's not to say their English is great. They need to come to Ireland for a few years, study it, and to
be immersed.
Yeah. So, and we should do the same. There should be interchange. I recently, I'm in Dragon's Den, so I invest in a couple of companies. Watch this Sunday as I invest in a fabulous new company. But a couple of these companies, actually 3 of them are doing some manufacturing in China. We actually brought I brought one of the guys there when I just came back from China the day before yesterday, and just to look at the Chinese factories to compare how he's doing it himself here in Ireland. He learned so much that he thinks he can cost competitively make his products in Ireland now that he knows how the Chinese are operating the factories and what they do, what the work processes are. And that is what you learn through open exchange.